Widowed father and baby vanish in 1993. 20 years later, a church donation box reveals everything. He packed only a diaper bag and a Bible, then disappeared without a trace. 20 years later, what a priest found in a rusted donation box unraveled, a secret buried in silence. The winter of 1993 dragged on longer than usual in the small town of Pine Hollow, Tennessee. Snow clung to rooftops like aging lace, and the roads shimmered with frozen patches that made even the bravest drivers slow down. On the edge of town, nestled between bare trees and brittle fences, stood a small blue house with cracked shutters and a porch that groaned under the weight of time. That was where Jonathan Reed had lived, a quiet blue-collar man with a wide back, warm hands, and tired eyes. He was the kind of man people waved to, even if they didn't know him well. A mechanic by trade, a father by heart. But after the sudden death of his wife Emily during childbirth, something in Jonathan shifted. The spark he once had, that flicker of purpose that lit up his gaze when he talked about the future, went out. Neighbors saw him less. His shop closed early, and the only sound from his house was the gentle murmur of lullabies as he rocked his newborn daughter Lily through sleepless nights. Grief isn't loud. It doesn't always scream or shatter plates. Sometimes it simply walks into a man's soul and sits there like a ghost that won't leave. That March, Jonathan told his closest friend Eddie that he needed a break. A road trip. Just me and Lily, he said, half smiling. We're going to clear our heads, drive until we find peace. Eddie thought nothing of it. Jonathan had always been the type to take long drives, even before Emily passed. Just a man, trying to breathe a little. But Jonathan and Lily never came back. At first, people assumed they'd gone to visit family. But Emily's parents had passed, and Jonathan had no siblings. When he missed a week of work, Eddie drove out to check on the house. The front door was locked. The heater still hummed. But the truck was gone. And on the kitchen table sat a single note written in blue pen. I'm taking her somewhere safe, somewhere quiet. Please don't look for us. Eddie handed the note to police, and within 48 hours, a missing persons investigation was opened. Flyers went up. Officers searched motels and gas stations along the interstate. Highway Patrol was notified in 3 states, but nothing came of it. No sightings. No credit card activity. No phone calls. It was as if Jonathan had simply vanished. 2 decades later, in the spring of 2013, an old priest named Father Thomas Keller arrived early for his Sunday service at St. Jude's Chapel, a remote stone church tucked deep in the Smoky Mountains of North Carolina. The church had once hosted dozens of families but had since faded into near obscurity. On most Sundays, only a handful of elderly parishioners filled its pews. Father Keller unlocked the front doors as usual, swept the stone steps, and lit the candles near the altar. It was during this quiet ritual that he made his way to the old donation box tucked beneath the staircase. Most weeks, the box held a few crumpled dollar bills, loose coins, maybe the occasional note asking for prayers. But that morning, the box held something else, an envelope, cream-colored, sealed with wax. And written across the front in shaky, fading handwriting were 4 words: to whom it may concern. Father Keller paused. He was not a man easily shaken, but something about the envelope made his hands tremble. He walked it to his office, placed it on his desk, and hesitated before breaking the seal. Inside was a letter and a photograph. The letter was 10 pages long, written in ballpoint pen on aged, yellowing paper. The first line read, "My name is Jonathan Reed. I have been missing since April 1993. Father Keller stared at the name. It didn't register at first, but the photo tucked into the folds made everything stop. A man, early 30s, bearded, hollow-eyed, cradling a baby wrapped in a flannel blanket. A woman's wedding ring dangled from a chain around his neck. On the back of the photo was a date, April 9th, 1993. Keller contacted the local sheriff. An investigation was reopened. Detective Mara Stetson was assigned the case. She'd grown up, hearing stories about the mechanic who ran away with his baby. It had always been framed like some sad urban legend. No body, no answers, just silence. She had just joined the department when the call came in. The moment she read the first 2 pages of Jonathan's letter, she knew this wasn't going to be simple. The letter explained everything, or so it seemed. Jonathan wrote of his deep depression after Emily's death, of feeling watched, judged, and hunted by something he couldn't name. He didn't believe he was safe. Not in Pine Hollow. Not anywhere familiar. He claimed there were men who had come to his garage weeks before he left, asking questions about Emily, about the hospital, about something she may have known. He never explained what exactly, but he was convinced someone wanted Lily. So he ran. He took cash from savings, packed formula, diapers, and Emily's Bible, and left everything else behind. He drove west for weeks, avoiding interstates, sleeping in parking lots, never staying anywhere more than one night. In his letter, he described the world like it was a chessboard, one where he was always one move from checkmate. In July 1993, Jonathan claimed to have found an abandoned cabin near the Tennessee-North Carolina border. It was small, hidden by trees, and in total disrepair. He fixed it up enough to survive the winter. It was quiet, he wrote. No roads, no mailboxes, no curious eyes. Just the sound of wind and a creek nearby. For the first time, I could sleep. He stayed there for years. He built a small life in the woods. He described teaching Lily how to walk along mossy stones, painting her fingernails with crushed berries, and reading bedtime stories by candlelight. He kept a journal, took photos with a disposable camera, and carved the days. Into a wooden beam above the fireplace. He never left the mountain. In 1997, Lily became sick. A high fever, a seizure. Jonathan carried her 6 miles to a clinic in the closest town under the name David Holloway. He told the nurse he was a traveler, no insurance, just passing through. Lily was treated and recovered. No one asked. Too many questions. But from that moment on, Jonathan knew their time in hiding had a clock on it. The letter ended abruptly. The final paragraph read, "If you're reading this, it means I am either gone or too close to being found. Please know that Lily was always safe. I never laid a hand on her. I never made her feel fear. I gave her everything I had, and then she was my reason, not my hostage." Detective Stetson felt something tighten in her chest. This wasn't the confession of a killer. This was something else entirely. But the question remained, where was Lily now, and who delivered the letter? Father Keller remembered something, a woman who had visited the chapel 2 nights before. She had come alone, sat in the back pew, and left before service began. Quiet, slender, early 30s. He remembered the way she touched the edge of the altar. As if she knew it. He hadn't seen her face clearly, but she left behind a small wooden cross, carved from ash, and etched into the side were 2 letters, ER, Emily Reed. Detectives launched a regional alert for any women matching Lily's, age and description, but nothing came up. No birth certificate, no school records, no medical insurance. She didn't exist, not officially, and yet she was real. The church envelope was sent for forensic testing. The ink was dated, written within the past year. The photo paper matched Kodak stock discontinued in 1999. Fingerprints were smudged. Useless. Whoever had delivered the letter had planned. This moment carefully. They had waited 2 decades, and now they were telling the story. On their terms. Jonathan Reed disappeared in 1993 with his baby daughter. For 2 decades, no one knew if he had taken his own life or simply fled. But when a sealed envelope surfaced in a remote church donation box, it reopened a case everyone thought was long buried. Inside that envelope was the truth, or at least the beginning of it. Detective Mara Stetson stared at the word sanctuary scribbled in the margins of Jonathan's final page. It had been almost a week since Father Keller found the envelope in St. Jude's Chapel. And while the letter spoke volumes, it still left a heavy silence between the lines. Jonathan never mentioned the exact location of where he and Lily lived. He wrote about creeks and mountains, wild animals and seasons, but never road names or coordinates. The one lead they had was the hand-carved cross left behind in the church pew. Carved from ash wood, initials etched along the grain, ER. The initials could have easily meant Emily Reed, Jonathan's late wife. But it raised more questions. If Lily had carved it, how would she even know her mother's initials? She was a newborn when Emily died. Did Jonathan tell her everything? Or did he keep her in the dark? And if she was alive, why hadn't she come forward? Detective Stetson requested a fresh forensic review of the donation box. Hidden behind the latch was a small flake of wax, identical to the seal used on Jonathan's envelope. It had tiny fibers stuck in it, fabric threads, possibly from a sleeve. Blue, denim. The lab noted that the wax was of an uncommon type, sold only by a few niche stores in the 1990s. One was located in Knoxville, another in Asheville. That narrowed the field. She put out a silent alert to area churches. If anyone had received a similar envelope or seen a young woman fitting Lily's possible age, mid to late 20s, Stetson wanted to know. 3 days passed. Then, the call came. It was from an elderly pastor at a small chapel in Murphy, North Carolina. A woman had arrived one morning asking if she could sit in the sanctuary alone. She didn't speak much. She lit a candle and cried quietly. When she left, she placed a tiny leather pouch in the donation box. Inside were 3 Polaroid photos. One of a bearded man holding a baby beside a creek. Another of the same man reading from a Bible with a little girl asleep in his lap. And a third of the girl standing alone outside a cabin, waving, written on the back. We were never lost, just hidden. The pastor hadn't thought much of it until he saw the alert from Pine Hollow. He faxed the photos to Stetson. Her hands shook as she held the prints. The little girl in the pictures had grown up, and she was trying to speak. A forensic team traced the creek in the first photo. The image contained a rare natural rock arch that geologists recognized. Only 2 such formations existed in the area, one located near the Smoky Mountain National Forest. Stetson and a small team drove out. After 3 hours of hiking, they found it, the stream, the arch, and then, tucked beyond a bend in the trail, a long-abandoned cabin buried in moss and overgrowth. Time had not been kind. The roof had partially collapsed. Ivy curled through broken window frames, but inside, the space was strangely preserved. A broken crib, handmade shelves. The wall marked with tiny scratches, growth lines, like someone had measured height over the years. On the back wall, burned faintly into the wood. Lily R., age 5, first snow, and next to it, Lily R., age 7, built a kite. This was their home, no doubt remained, in a metal box beneath the hearthstone. Investigators discovered several rolls of undeveloped film, moldy blankets, and 2 cassette tapes wrapped in wax paper. Written in faded ink on one of them. If found, please listen alone. The audio was scratchy, muffled by years of decay. But Jonathan's voice came through clearly enough. Jonathan's recorded message. Narration summary. This is for whoever finds this. Maybe it's Lily. Maybe it's no one. I don't know. But I need someone to hear it. I never meant to vanish. I never meant to be a ghost. But after Emily, I lost the only map I ever had. I took Lily because I was afraid of the world, not of being a father. I didn't trust anyone. I thought someone was coming for us. Maybe it was in my head. Maybe not. But in that cabin, I found something close to peace. You won't find my body here. I left the cabin in 2004 when her fever returned. We found help in a town nearby. The woman who helped us, she had no family. She offered us a place to stay if I worked on her farm. We lived there for years. Then in 2005, I got sick. Pneumonia. Couldn't recover. I told Lily not to be afraid, to keep moving, to never give her name. I taught her how to disappear, because sometimes it's the only way to stay safe. She's not hiding because of guilt. She's hiding because I asked her to. By the end of the tape, Detective Stetson had tears in her eyes. This wasn't the story she expected. No abduction, no violence, just grief, fear, survival, and love. But the case wasn't closed yet. One final question haunted her. Who was the woman who helped them? And more importantly, where was Lily now? 3 weeks passed without a trace. Then, one morning, Father Keller received another envelope. No wax seal this time. Just a folded sheet of paper and a silver necklace inside. A locket, engraved on the back, to Emily, forever. Inside the letter, written in elegant handwriting, I kept it all these years. It was always meant for her. I think you'll know who should have it next. No signature. But the DNA on the envelope matched the same partial strand recovered from the church donation box. It was Lily. She had returned once more, quietly, from the shadows, to place something in the hands of someone who could finish what her father started. Detective Stetson held a press briefing. She shared Jonathan's story, edited, respectful. She asked for Lily to come forward, assuring there were no charges, no arrests, only understanding, only the truth. Then one day, a woman walked into the precinct, brown hair tied back, no makeup. Calm. Eyes, she said. I believe you're looking for me. For 20 years, Lily Reed lived in silence. Her father vanished with her when she was just a baby. They survived in the shadows of the mountains, guided by fear, grief, and love. But now, with a confession delivered through a church donation box, Lily has come forward, and the world is about to hear the truth it wasn't ready for. The interrogation room at the Asheville Police Department was cold, but Lily didn't seem to notice. She sat across from Detective Mara Stetson, hands folded, posture straight. She looked nothing like a person who had been hiding her entire life. She looked composed, calm, but her eyes carried decades of buried truths. Mara didn't press. She simply slid a glass of water toward her and said, "Whenever you're ready." Lily stared at her reflection in the table's surface, then nodded slowly. I never knew I was missing, she began. Not until I was 11. Lily's story unfolded like a quiet storm, no drama, no raised voices, just truth, layered, raw, unedited. She remembered growing up in the woods with her father. She never called him Dad. He was always John. That's what he asked her to call him. Dad was too vulnerable, too traceable. He taught her everything. How to forage, how to track animals, how to cook without fire smoke giving away their location. They built shelters from branches and tarps, bathed in creeks, laughed under stars. She never questioned it. For her, the forest was home. We made our own world, Lily said, and we never needed anyone else. But when she was 8, they encountered a woman. Her name was Mabel, late 60s, kind eyes, no family. She found them outside a supply shack near a logging road in North Carolina. Jonathan had collapsed from exhaustion. Lily tried to help, but she was just a child. Mabel loaded them into her truck and drove them back to her property, an old farm, tucked miles off the nearest paved road. She never called the police, never asked questions. She just helped. She told me once, Lily said, people who carry pain like that don't need punishment. They need peace. Mabel became their guardian angel. She gave them a guest room, let Jonathan work on the farm, and slowly earned his trust. For 5 years they lived there. 5 years of a strange, secret peace. But peace, Lily said, comes with a cost. One winter when Lily was 12, Jonathan got sick. Fever, chills, coughing blood. Mabel begged him to go to a hospital. He refused. He knew that if he registered under a false name, someone might start digging, and the wrong people might find Lily. So he stayed, and he died. Lily buried him beneath a tree behind the barn, just her and Mabel. No ceremony, no stone, just a wooden cross and a moment of silence. She didn't cry, not until 3 days later, when she found Jonathan's journal in the attic. Inside were pages of letters written to her, letters he never read aloud. One said, "You will grow, you will love, you will hurt. But promise me, you'll never let anyone tell you who you are. You are not a mistake. You are a miracle." Mabel kept her hidden after that. Homeschooled her. Falsified papers to say she was her granddaughter. They moved. Twice when suspicious neighbors got too nosy. But in 2012, Mabel died from a stroke, and Lily was alone again. "I didn't know how to exist," Lily said, her voice breaking for the first time. "I didn't have a name that matched any record, no birth certificate, no ID. No one knew who I was. I didn't exist on paper, and I didn't know how to be real." So she disappeared once more. She spent a year living in shelters, moving from town to town. She worked off the books in diners, slept in church basements, lived like a ghost. Until one day, she walked past a chapel in the Smoky Mountains and felt something pull her inside. It was St. Jude's, the one her father once described as a place God keeps forgotten things. That's where she left the envelope and the locket. Detective Stetson sat back, stunned. She had heard confessions before, plenty, but nothing like this. This wasn't a crime. It was a pilgrimage. Still, Lily wasn't done. She pulled something from her coat, a small leather-bound notebook. "Jonathan's journal. Read it," she said. "You'll understand." Inside were sketches of their cabin, pressed wildflowers, maps drawn by hand, and letters addressed to her. But one entry stood out. It was dated June 1993, and it read, "They came to the shop again, same men, asking about Emily. I told them I didn't know anything, but they knew. They knew she had the locket. They knew she was close to talking. That's why they wanted Lily. That's why we had to go." Detective Stetson narrowed her eyes. "What locket?" Lily opened her palm, the silver locket from the envelope. "It was Emily's," she said. "John always said never open it unless I needed the truth." Inside was a small photo of a baby, Lily, and beneath it, tucked into a hidden groove, a folded slip of paper. It read, "They never wanted me. They wanted what Emily knew." The mystery deepened. What did Emily know, and who were they? Stetson had to go back to the beginning. She revisited Emily Reed's death certificate. Cause: complications during childbirth, declared by a hospital in Spring Hill. No autopsy was performed. At the time, the case seemed routine. But when Stetson requested archived records, something strange appeared. Emily had been involved in a lawsuit against the pharmaceutical company that produced the prenatal vitamins she was prescribed. The claim was that they caused severe side effects. The case was dismissed due to insufficient evidence. But Emily had been writing a report, a detailed one, mentioned in passing in a note from her doctor. That report was never found, and shortly after her death, 2 men, private investigators, visited the hospital and requested access to her records. Unofficially. Was Jonathan telling the truth all along? Was someone trying to cover something up? Stetson wasn't sure. But the timeline aligned. Jonathan vanishes after Emily dies. Men visit the garage, he flees, and Lily grows up in hiding. It wasn't about Jonathan. It wasn't even about Lily. It was about Emily and what she was about to expose. Lily didn't know what her mother had discovered, but she believed it was the reason her father vanished and the reason he stayed gone. As the interview ended, Stetson asked, "Why come forward now?" Lily looked down, smiled faintly, and said, "Because the story matters, and stories need endings." Lily Reed finally came forward, telling the world what really happened after she and her father vanished in 1993. But her story uncovered something darker, something that began not with her father, but with her mother. Now, as Detective Stetson digs deeper into a case once believed closed, the truth behind a buried pharmaceutical scandal begins to surface, and nothing will ever be the same. Detective Mara Stetson sat in her office staring at the printout in front of her. A faded hospital ledger, recovered from microfilm archives, listing patient records from Spring Hill Medical Center in 1993. It was the day Emily Reed gave birth. The hospital's official notes were sparse. Labor induced at 39 weeks, fetal heart, rate normal, complications during delivery, hemorrhage, death declared at 3:32 a.m., but there was something unusual. A side note written in pen, barely visible in the corner. Mother insisted on submitting full report on symptoms before delivery. Said it was urgent, copy given to OB. No such report had ever been found, no digital file, no hard copy, not even a mention in the physician's final statement. Stetson called Dr. Nora Winslow, the obstetrician listed on Emily's file. Now retired, Winslow lived in a quiet community outside Nashville. She answered the phone after 3 rings. "I remember her," the woman said softly. Emily was kind, strong, but scared. She kept saying something wasn't right. "Do you recall a report she gave you?" Stetson asked. There was a pause. "I do," Winslow said. "But I didn't keep it. 2 men came the day after she passed. Said they were from the pharmaceutical board. Showed credentials. They said there was a confidentiality breach and collected everything she'd written. I didn't argue. I was young, nervous, and they looked official." Stetson's pulse quickened. "What was in the report?" Winslow hesitated. She had linked a batch number from her prenatal vitamins to abnormal symptoms. Headaches, arrhythmias, early swelling. She had done research, compared notes with other pregnant women. She thought it was bigger than her. She believed they knew. The prenatal company, Avalon Therapeutics, had long since merged into a larger conglomerate, Halbrin Pharma, a billion-dollar entity with powerful lawyers and a clean record on paper. But Stetson wasn't looking at the public records. She requested an internal audit through the FDA whistleblower database. That's when she found it. Case file, RA93XP44 complaint. Adverse maternal events potentially linked to prenatal sample distribution batch B121. Status: internal review closed. No further investigation. Filed anonymously. March 1993. The same month, Emily died. But that wasn't the most damning part. The case file was sealed under court order. From a lawsuit brought by Jonathan Reed. Stetson's jaw tightened. Jonathan had tried. He hadn't just run away in silence. He had fought first. He filed a legal complaint on Emily's behalf, accusing Avalon Therapeutics of negligence, coercion, and intimidation. But the case was dismissed due to lack of surviving party and credible evidence. It all vanished, just like him. The timeline was no longer a mystery. Jonathan's lawsuit threatened a quiet giant. Emily's report was a risk they couldn't allow. And when both disappeared, the trail went cold. Stetson took all the evidence, copies of the original complaint, the sealed FDA file, Emily's missing report references, and brought it to ADA Caroline Bryce, a state prosecutor known for taking on legacy corruption cases. Bryce read the folder twice, then asked one question. "Do you think Lily's life was ever in danger?" Stetson nodded. "I think that's why he ran. A new investigation was launched. Halbrand Pharma denied all allegations, of course. They claimed records from the 1990s had been destroyed, that their merge with Avalon voided previous legal liabilities. But public pressure grew after Lily's story went viral. A news outlet picked up the headline, "The Baby Who Vanished and the Mother Who Tried to Warn the World." Suddenly, there were whispers, emails from ex-employees, a former Avalon secretary who remembered shredding boxes of reports after Emily Reed's death, a nurse who remembered being told not to ask questions. But it wasn't until Lily stepped in front of a camera that everything changed. She didn't speak like a victim. She spoke like a daughter, a woman, a voice that had lived without being, heard for too long. "I didn't grow up with a birth certificate," she said. "I grew up with a journal, a hand-built cabin, a memory of my father crying beside a lantern while the world forgot he existed. We didn't disappear to hide a crime. We disappeared because no one wanted our truth." The video went viral. Millions watched. The state reopened Emily's file. The FDA launched a full audit. The media storm forced Halbrand into damage control. But most importantly, Lily was no longer invisible. In the weeks that followed, Detective Stetson became less of an officer and more of an archivist, reconstructing a story erased by time. Every box she opened, every slip of paper she recovered, added a piece to the puzzle. Then one morning, she received a call from a storage facility in Knoxville, a rusted locker, unclaimed since 1993, rented under the name D. Holloway, Jonathan's alias. Inside were cardboard boxes sealed with duct tape, toys, baby clothes, a tiny shoe, and at the bottom a large manila envelope labeled, "To Lily. If the world is ready." Inside were copies of Emily's original notes, typed pages, handwritten footnotes, medical research, personal interviews. The report she had written before dying, preserved by Jonathan, hidden until the moment his daughter could carry it. Lily took the documents to Caroline Bryce, and this time the evidence wasn't erased. It was broadcast. Congressional. Hearings were called. Halbrand Pharma executives were subpoenaed. Former Avalon managers were placed under oath. And while no arrests were made immediately, a truth long buried had finally come to light. Because of one father, one daughter, and a faith that stories, real stories, can survive anything. Even silence. Lily Reed's voice had been lost for decades. But with her father's journal, her mother's, hidden research, and a story that spanned generations, she unearthed the truth that powerful hands once tried to bury. Now, as the investigation reaches its final stretch, the world begins to reckon with the cost of forgetting and the courage it takes to remember. The hearing room in Washington, D.C. was filled with cameras, not because a celebrity walked in, not because a politician made a mistake, but because a young woman with a soft voice and steel in her spine was about to speak truth to silence. Lily sat down before the House Oversight Committee. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice did. "Not. My name is Lily Reed. I was born in 1993. I spent most of my life in hiding because my father believed people would come for me if they knew what my mother tried to say. My mother died giving birth to me. Her name was Emily. She was 28. She paused, swallowed, then continued. She believed a prenatal drug she had been given was making women sick. She researched it, documented it. She tried to share what she found. But after she died, her report disappeared. 2 men showed up at the hospital and took everything. No one ever followed up. No one ever asked why. And my father, Jonathan Reed, filed a complaint, tried to sue. But the case was dismissed. And soon after, we were gone. Lily's testimony was broadcast nationwide. Her story sparked protests, op-eds, demands for pharmaceutical transparency. A senator called it the most compelling case of institutional erasure in modern memory. But through it all, Lily remained focused. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth and legacy. Back home, Detective Stetson sat in front of the old donation box at St. Jude's Chapel. The same one where it all started. She ran her fingers along the grain of the wood, tracing the groove where Jonathan's wax-sealed envelope once dropped. The box, in a strange way, had become a confessional. Not for sins, but for survival. She smiled, then opened her notebook and wrote, "Case closed. By a daughter's courage." 3 months passed. The media storm died down. Halbrin paid millions in damages to families who came forward with similar stories. A class action lawsuit was filed. The company restructured. Executives were replaced, but none of that mattered to Lily, not as much as what came next. She returned to the cabin, the same overgrown shell buried deep in the forest. With new lumber strapped to her back and tools in hand, she rebuilt the walls, scrubbed the old floors, hung a photo of her father above the fireplace, not because she wanted to live in the past, but because she wanted the past to live again. Honestly, clearly, without shame. She turned the cabin into a retreat, a place for women with no place left to go, a quiet shelter for survivors. Named after her mother, the Emily Reed Sanctuary. Each room was lined with journals and letters, books and soft beds, and in the center of the main hall, beneath soft lights and wooden beams, was a single framed quote from Jonathan's journal. "When the world goes quiet, listen. That's where the truth waits." One day, a woman arrived at the sanctuary with nothing but a backpack and a worn photo in her hand. She said she had seen Lily's story on the news, said she had once taken the same vitamins, had the same symptoms, had lost the same way. Lily took her hand, led her inside, and whispered, "You're home." It didn't take long for the sanctuary to fill. Word spread, donations came in, volunteers arrived, and soon, what began as a hidden place for a father and daughter became a haven for dozens. Back at the church, Father Keller received one last envelope. No return address, just a note and an object. The note read, "For the church that never asked questions, only gave peace." Inside was Jonathan's silver pocket, watch still ticking. Father Keller placed it on the chapel altar, next to the cross, and every now and then, when the wind swept through the open doors during a quiet sermon, the hands would move just slightly faster, as if time itself was remembering. Detective Stetson eventually retired from law enforcement. But she didn't stop working. She became a private investigator, specializing in cold cases of missing women and children. Cases that reminded her of Lily, of the cost of being forgotten, of the power in being found. One afternoon, years later, she visited the sanctuary. She found Lily standing barefoot in the garden, planting wildflowers. Stetson smiled and said, "You ever wonder what he'd think of all this?" Lily looked up, wiped her hands on her jeans, and nodded slowly. "I think he'd finally believe we were safe." The two women stood in silence, listening to the wind move through the trees, through the bones of a rebuilt home, and somewhere between the breeze and the earth, it sounded like peace. Thanks for sticking with the story until the end. If you enjoyed it, give this a like and share if you haven't already, and subscribe for more.